Checking the redirects, I think, is really important, and doing that prior to things going live.
For anybody who's listening today, I get they would have a great checklist to start with.
Biggest lesson learned here is those pre and post launch checks are so critical.
Welcome to the Performance SEO Unpacked podcast, where leading experts reveal practical solutions for scaling enterprise and e-commerce growth. Deep dive into cutting-edge AI SEO strategies.
I'm excited to welcome Leighann Follis to the podcast. As a global SEO manager at JLL and other enterprise brands, she brings extensive expertise in technical SEO. Today, she'll be sharing her insights on large scale website migrations, a complex and highly technical process that requires expert execution to get it right. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ruki. It's great to be here.
So, as I touched upon, this is such a technical process. I would love to capture, as much detail for people, the listeners, for today to get, to how to tackle the large scale web migration. And to begin with, what's that one thing that, in your opinion, that great seasoned expert professionals can also be staying up at night when it comes to technical migration? What's that one thing that keeps them awake?
Yeah, I think though the biggest thing that keeps us awake at night is losing that positioning and visibility on search, right? I mean, I think we all know that every website migration is going to come with its challenges and risks, and we all know that once you finish the migration, there's going to be a decline in visibility for a short period of time. But like when you're working on big organization websites and that have a lot of authority built up, you'll see that trends start to reverse somewhere around 4 weeks typically. Now, I've seen instances where we've had migrations where we're consolidating sites and you see notable improvement almost immediately. But then there's also those challenging ones where we've seen instances of doing site migrations and after the 4 weeks, you go to check into the data and you start to see that that decline is continued decline, it continues to suffer. And this opens up some really good opportunities for us to take a real deep dive technically into the site and find out if there's anything there that, might be able to help rectify the issue and get those numbers back up.
That's interesting. And that 4 week period is very interesting that you mentioned right now. Is it something that you've seen consistently around that period, or it kind of moves and changes as per the size of the
Yeah,
website?
that's a really good question, and typically this is when you're dealing with websites that are, very authoritative. They've got a lot of backlinks. They've been around for decades sometimes. But when you have a bigger or smaller site, something that doesn't have as many backlinks and as authority built up, it might not be as generous. You might have a little bit more of time to get those rankings back up. But typically with a site that has a lot of authority already built up, I mean, I've definitely seen it where it's typically around 4 weeks where we start to see that trend to just reverse. Now, I'm not saying you're going to get back up to where you were, but it's
Mhm.
starting to reverse itself. That's when okay, Google has processed these redirects, they're processing our new site maps, they're understanding our new URLs and where things may have changed.
So interestingly, when we're looking at these larger websites, and typically, in my experience, what we've seen is whenever you're doing a website migration, everybody starts getting their wish list, opened up. Let's consolidate this, let's change the navigation structure, make it more beautiful, or maybe make a tool here. There are all sorts of ideas that starts coming in from webmasters and from stakeholders coming in. So how do you determine what to consolidate, what to keep, what to remove while you're doing the website migration?
Yeah. So when it comes to things with content, that's a good question to put into play around your age and your relevancy of the content. How old is the content? Is it still visible? Is it relevant to what we currently are wanting to say on this particular topic? Is it consistent with the brand message house? But then also looking at like the performance metrics and some of the SEO metrics. So how much traffic is it currently getting? Is there an opportunity for us to optimize this content? If it's not performing as well, why is that? Is there an opportunity for us to consolidate content based on competition? Is there not enough content on the page? Perhaps we need to talk about, building out the content a bit more. And then how many backlinks does it have currently built up? Do we need to redirect that somewhere and make sure that we're retaining some of that authority? And what does that user experience look like? Where are we redirecting that user to? And does it make sense based on the intent? Now, I think you are touching upon some bigger ticket items, things like around your navigation.
Yeah.
That's a big one to tackle because when you're trying to get all of these pages, because a lot of times it's about consolidating the content. It's about making structural changes so that way the bucketing of your content is consistent. And you're adding in all of these different elements, it does make things a lot more challenging. There's been instances where we've had to change our navigation based on just like hierarchical changes that we're making to our IA, and those comes with challenges because then you have to find a way to redirect those URLs, have consistency with like your slug, for example, but then being able to just kind of change that folder path. And we've seen some success doing that utilizing some regex rules, which was a really
Mm.
good experience for us to put into play.
And how would that shape up, when you are doing a multi-country, multi-language website migration? I guess the complexity just tenfolds.
Well, then that's where the regex rules really can come into play. If you have consistency within your URL structures from the two different language versions of your website, then that's a way that you can use those regex rules to kind of capture them at one time and just drop off that language identifier. But a lot of times you do see that those URLs are translated into, the local language. And so then that does make it a lot more challenging because it's a big load on your server to have all of those redirects in place.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. Yeah, I guess server optimization is something that you always need to keep in mind while you are doing these redirects specifically.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, totally. Very interested to hear, maybe a story where, things did not go as planned, and what did your team do, and what was the way out of that migration situation that you would have handled ever?
Yeah, so there was one instance where we had a lot of sites that we were migrating onto a new CMS, and so if you can imagine, there was many different domains because every market had their own website that they were managing. So they were
Wow.
working on this as like a rolling cadence. So you start with one website and then you move on to the next. And the team of the SEO, or the role of the SEO team at the time, was very much helping to create those redirects that we were just talking about that ended up getting very complex just to CMS issues that created a lot of URLs that just shouldn't have been created in the first place. Lots of perforated folder paths that were being created by the CMS, and trying to capture all those and bucket them down into one URL. That was a big challenge. But what we found the situation in is that once we went to revisit the data about 4 weeks, the old URLs that we had on the old website, they were being de-indexed from Google, which was great because we knew that
Mhm.
that Google was processing the redirects and they were removing
Yeah.
them from the index. But what we were noticing is that the new URLs weren't getting indexed in their place. And so we were tasked with finding out why Google wasn't indexing these URLs. So we sprang into action, did technical audits on the sites, and we found some major technical issues that was preventing these sites from being indexed. One of them being in the robots.txt file, we had to disallow a rule while the site was in development. That rule wasn't removed when the site went live. So that was a big miss right there. And then the other things that we were seeing was canonical issues with hreflang tags and URL malformations. And to make things even more complex is those URL malformations were producing 200 response codes. So once we actually got
Wow.
the URLs getting indexed, the wrong URLs were getting indexed. So it really got complex fast. And so I think the biggest takeaway, the biggest lesson learned here is those pre and post launch checks are so critical. But this needs to happen at the planning stages. You need to have that time carved out for that pre launch check before things go live. And then the post launch check is still just as important as the pre launch check because I've definitely seen in instances as well where in the stage site, everything seems to be kosher, everything seems to be correct. But then when it goes to production, there's some sort of issue that we weren't prepared for. And that typically has something to do with the CMS itself. And then things can get a little bit more complex from there.
One of the issues that you just touched upon, which is, robots.txt, seems like such a simple thing, that anybody who's just starting their career in SEO, the first thing that they would learn about is robots.txt. And leaving that as a disallow and then getting everything, not getting indexed
It was
is
a big miss.
such a very basic thing, but can be such a big problem in the magnitude of the
It
scale.
sure was, it sure was, and so those technical audits, we ended up going and doing them for all of the sites, and we saw a lot of the same issues across the board, and so what this was able to
Oh,
do was create a roadmap for the development team for the rest of the year. So this also allowed us an opportunity to say, "Okay, here's some of the issues that we're finding, this is what the dev team is working on," and help to communicate up to the stakeholders what the value of those some of those changes are bringing to the table.
yeah. That brings me to a very interesting point, maybe not a full extensive list, but if, you mentioned a checklist and the planning stage for migration. If you had to put down, the must haves in a checklist for somebody who's planning a large website migration, what would that entail?
A list of a check for a pre or post-launch check for a migration?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, just at a top level, that these are the must to haves.
sure. So I love to do the audits with Screaming Frog. That's gonna help identify
Mm.
a lot of your technical issues. Clearly, the Robots.txt, that's a big one that you're gonna need to check with, and your canonical tags, making sure that those are correct, making sure your metadata is in place, that the pages are loading as expected. And all of that can be done through an SEO tool like Screaming Frog, or SEMrush has a tool. Just about every SEO tool out there has one where you can just crawl the site and find these issues relatively easily and export them out to your dev team. Checking the redirects, I think, is really important, and doing that prior to things going live. Being able to set up like a host file onto your computer to be able to test those redirects, and using a proxy server, I think, is critical too.
Yeah, I love Screaming Frog whenever it comes to anything technical. The data is just very insightful. I love the insights.
Absolutely, and it gives you some insights outside of what a normal SEO tool, I think, would give you. Even with,
Yeah,
like, the security
totally.
issues, I think that's a good add-on for for Screaming
Yeah.
Frog.
And I love their internal linking map that they create. It's so visually
Mhm.
nice and to grasp all the information that you can out of it. I just love
A
that piece of the tool.
Absolutely.
Great. So, if you had to do a website migration with no access to SEO tool, what is that one thing that you would really rely on to make sure that nothing's falling apart?
I would really not want to do it without an SEO tool. That's the SEO in me that's speaking to that. I mean, any sort of data visualization tool, where you can combine a lot of different data points together, I think, is critical. So, like Google Data Studio is a great example. Being able to get some of that analytics data, couple it with some of your keyword positioning, your backlink information, I think, is going to give you a better picture of what's happening from a search standpoint, and helping to find some of those issues. Having something that can actually crawl your site beyond just a CMS. So being able to process that site outside of what your CMS is going to find for you, I think, is important, because you're going to see it from the way that Google's going to be crawling it, and not necessarily, how you have that CMS particularly set up.
Great, interesting. And if, someone is listening and is planning a major website redirect, what is that one advice that you would say that they should absolutely keep in mind and they just cannot afford to ignore? What would that be?
Know all of the URLs that Google is aware of. I can't stress this enough, and thank me later. I've seen it happen before, where, we use UTMs in marketing all of the time. There's other
Yes.
types of URLs that can get created. Like if you have pagination, for example, and there's bots that are just creating different types of variations of your URLs. These are things that you're not going to know through your CMS. These are things that you're likely ignoring in your analytics. So being able to see all of the URLs that Google is aware of and knows about, and being able to create a redirect plan for that, I think, is critical. One of the things that I like to do is not only get an export of everything that Google has indexed, but then being able to, again, utilizing something like Screaming Frog, to be able to pull in that analytics data, and then pull in your backlinks data, so that way you can look at it holistically and say, again, to the point of, how do you determine what content to keep. You can see, the age of the content. You can see whether or not it's performing. You can see whether or not it has backlinks, all in one shot, to where you can prioritize those URLs to make it a little bit easier for your content team to kind of look at all of the pages to say, yes, all of this can be removed, all of this can be kept, and the things that are in the middle, that's less work for them to have to decide. So I would have to say, again, knowing all the URLs that Google is aware of, is critical. You don't want that skewing your analytics down the line because of the
Yeah.
URLs you forgot about. But then again, the pre and post launch checks, super important. There's so many technical issues that can happen during a website migration that if you're
Mm.
posting or if you're pushing these things live and then you're looking at the data weeks after the time, you've already missed out on so much time that it's a running uphill battle to try to get some of that positioning back. Again, full circle, taking us back to our biggest concern and what keeps us up at night.
No, absolutely. I think you've emphasized enough on working with data here. Picking up data signals from wherever possible, right from your search consoles to analytical tools to any marketing tools. At times, and you touched upon a right thing. The UTMs that we create in marketing, and some of the times I've seen some individual marketing teams creating some pages that are just sitting orphaned because they're serving that one campaign,
Yeah.
and you never get to know about that because it's not a part of the main navigation system, and then it just kind of becomes a nightmare while migration happens.
And you're speaking to a thing another thing that, I wanted to make sure we mentioned too is being mindful of those downstream impacts that you may not be aware of. Like us as SEOs, there's certain things that we're focusing on. And then you have those campaign pages where there may be still be a campaign that's going towards those pages, but they're not performing for one reason or another. And so you can't necessarily take that particular URL away because then you're kind of cutting your campaign team off at the foot. So you want to make sure that you're aware of all of those before you make any decisions as well.
One thing that just comes to my mind right now while talking to you is, we as traditionally we've seen, traffic go down and it takes a dip, and you started, mentioning that it kind of takes about 4 weeks to settle back in. Making the stakeholders understand, or making the C-suite understand that the website will not be performing enough or to its potential during the migration phase, specifically if it's a e-commerce website. How do you manage that kind of a situation? How do you prep somebody to tell them, okay, the business is going to take a hit for 4 weeks?
Yeah, that's a tough conversation to have, but I like to look at the positives of what's happening because typically if you're doing a migration, there's a reason for the migration, right? Either it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
fulfilling stakeholder needs, the information is hard to find. You may be switching just to a CMS. It could be something as simple as that, but as we discussed at the top of the call was, you know, a lot of times you're seeing navigational changes. You're seeing changes to the IA to make things easier for folks to find. And so, while yes, organically, we're going to take a little bit of a hit because Google has to relearn these changes. Think of everything that you're getting. You likely getting new designs. You're getting things easier to for folks to be able to find. And as that user journey gets easier, that experience is better for the user. It improves everything organically as well. So you
Yeah.
set that benchmark. Let's talk about this, in 6 months, and let's see, because they always say to see all of the fruits of your SEO efforts, it takes 6 months to a year, right? Let's come back in six
Yeah.
months and see, is that organic traffic? Is it performing better than it was prior to the migration? And if yes, then everything is a success. So you have to give it a little bit of time, but make sure you're focusing on all of the great things that you're getting in addition to improved organic visibility. And there's
Yeah.
always paid. You can always throw paid budget at it as well and help kind of supplement that
Totally.
visibility while those
Yeah.
strategies are taking hold.
Yeah, no, totally. I completely agree. You mentioned it right that you always have those complementing marketing channels to take care of the business at that point of time, because this is a due course that the website has to go through when the large migration is happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. Necessary evil sometimes of the decline in traffic.
Yes, rightly said. The necessary
Yeah,
evil here.
yes.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and you've given some great insights for anybody who's listening today. I get they would have a great checklist to start with, and some caution areas on the mistakes, robots.txts, not to ignore
Never.
and to take care of everything
Absolutely.
during the migration. Thank you so much for being on the
It's been
show.
great being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.